The night changed the moment she entered the club. She did not scream, she did not beg. She only limped through the golden doorway, soaked by rain, holding her torn sleeve against her side, and whispered the words no one expected. "I am sorry." The music inside Club Obsidian stopped as if someone had cut the heart from the room. The club sat in the richest part of Gangnam, hidden behind black glass, gold pillars, and a private entrance where ordinary people were never allowed to stand. Outside, rain washed over rows of black luxury cars. Neon lights reflected on the wet road like broken jewels. Inside, men in expensive suits watched from velvet booths while women in silk dresses held their glasses without drinking. At the center of it all sat Kang Joon-Seo. He did not move at first. He sat in a private corner under low golden light, one arm resting on the back of the leather seat, his tattooed fingers wrapped around a glass he had not touched. His black suit looked simple, but every man in that room knew it cost more than a car. His face was calm, handsome, and unreadable. He had the kind of silence that made powerful people lower their voices. He was not only the owner of Club Obsidian, he was the man people feared before they knew his name. The woman took another weak step forward. Her dark hair stuck to her wet cheeks. Her lips trembled, but her eyes were not empty. They were full of fear, pain, and something deeper than fear. Something she was trying to hide. Joon-Seo noticed it immediately. His guards moved first. 4 men reached into their jackets. Another stepped in front of the woman, blocking her from coming closer. She lifted one shaking hand. "Please," she whispered. "I did not mean to come here." That made the room even quieter. Joon-Seo slowly raised 2 fingers. The guard stopped. The woman looked past them, straight at him. Her eyes were wide, but she was not looking at his face for mercy. She was looking around the room, at the doors, at the windows, at the private hallway behind the bar. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of whoever might come after her. Joon-Seo stood. The whole club seemed to shrink around him. His right-hand man, Seo Min-jae, stepped close to him and spoke in a low voice. "Boss, this is wrong. No one walks into Obsidian like this by accident." Joon-Seo did not answer. He walked toward the woman slowly. The sound of his shoes against the black marble floor echoed through the room. Every guest turned away, pretending not to watch, but no one could stop watching. When he reached her, he saw more clearly what the rain and dim light had hidden. Her sleeve was torn. One side of her face was pale. A thin bracelet hung broken around her wrist, its clasp twisted as if someone had grabbed it too hard. But it was her apology that stayed in his mind. Not help me, not save me, only I am sorry. Joon-Seo looked down at her. "What is your name?" The woman swallowed. "Yoon Mira. Who sent you here?" Her breath caught. For 1 second, her eyes moved toward the entrance. That 1 second told him enough. Min-jae saw it too. "Lock the front," Min-jae ordered the guards. But Joon-Seo lifted his hand again, stopping him. He wanted the room to hear his next words. "Shut every door." The command passed through the club like a cold wind. Heavy locks clicked at the entrance. The private elevator froze. The service exit sealed. The gold curtains were drawn over the glass walls. Men who had laughed minutes earlier now sat stiff and pale in their seats. Mira closed her eyes when she heard the locks. For a moment, Joon-Seo thought she might collapse. Instead, she whispered, "You should not have done that." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" She opened her eyes, and the pain inside them looked older than the wound on her body. "Because now they know I reached you." A low murmur moved through the room. Joon-Seo turned his head slightly. The murmur died. Outside, thunder rolled above Gangnam. Rain struck the black windows like fingers tapping from the dark. Joon-Seo looked again at Mira's broken bracelet. It was not expensive enough to belong in this club. It was old, delicate, and strange. A small part of the clasp had turned outward, showing a hidden mark scratched into the metal, a crescent, and something curved around it. His chest tightened before his mind understood why. For years he had trained himself not to react. He had watched men betray him, beg him, threaten him, and lie to his face. He had built an empire from silence. He had buried every weakness so deep that even his family believed there was nothing left to use against him. But that mark reached a place he had never buried properly. A memory flashed in his mind. A younger girl laughing in the garden of the old Kang estate, a bracelet in her hand, a stormy night, an empty room, his sister's name spoken in panic, Sumin. Joon-Seo's fingers tightened at his side. Mira saw the change in his face, small as it was. She pulled her wrist away and hid the bracelet under her torn sleeve. That confirmed it. She knew the bracelet mattered. Min-jae stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "Boss?" Joon-Seo did not look at him. He kept his gaze on Mira. "Who gave you that bracelet?" Mira's face went still, no answer. Joon-Seo leaned closer, his voice calm but heavy. "Yoon Mira, you walked into my club injured, apologizing, and carrying a symbol connected to a night my family buried in lies." Her breathing became uneven. "I do not know anything about your family." "That is the wrong lie." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Across the club, every guest remained frozen. The air smelled of rain, perfume, expensive alcohol, and fear. The gold lights shone on the black marble like fire trapped under ice. Joon-Seo turned to his men. No one leaves, no calls, no messages. Check every camera from the street to the roof. Find the car that dropped her near my door. Then he looked back at Mira. And bring the family file. Min-jae's face changed. The old file, Joon-Seo's jaw hardened. The night my sister disappeared, Mira whispered almost too softly to hear. Then it is true. Joon-Seo looked at her. What is true? She looked toward the sealed doors as if expecting death to knock. The man who sent me said you would open the past if I survived long enough to reach you. The club fell silent again. Joon-Seo stepped back. For the first time that night, his voice carried something colder than anger. Then he wanted me to see you. Mira nodded faintly. I think so. Why? Her broken bracelet slipped from under her sleeve, catching the gold light. Because he said you still have one weakness. Joon-Seo stared at the hidden symbol. The crescent wrapped in a serpent. His sister's mark. His family's secret, his enemy's invitation. Then he gave the order that turned the night into a war. Find out who touched her. And as the club doors stayed locked against the rain, Kang Joon-Seo understood one thing clearly. The woman had not come to him for safety. She had been sent to unlock his grief. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Kang Joon-Seo had learned long ago that fear had a sound. It was not always a scream. Sometimes it was a glass placed too gently on a table. Sometimes it was a rich man laughing 1 second too late. Sometimes it was a woman breathing carefully because she knew the wrong word could end her life. Tonight fear sounded like silence. Club Obsidian remained locked under the storm. The golden lights had been lowered until the whole room looked like a palace buried underground. Shadows sat in the corners. Rain slid down the black glass walls. The music was gone, and without it, every small movement became loud. Joon-Seo stood in the middle of the club with Yoon Mira in front of him. She looked fragile under the gold light, but he knew better than to trust appearances. Fragile things could still carry dangerous secrets. Broken things could still cut. Min-jae moved beside him, close enough that only Joon-Seo could hear him. Boss, this is exactly how traps begin. Joon-Seo did not look away from Mira. Then we study the trap. Min-jae's eyes moved to the guests. There are politicians here, investors, 2 sons from the Daesung Hotel family. If they panic, this becomes public. It became public the moment someone sent her through my door. Mira lowered her eyes, but her hand remained tight around her torn bracelet. Joon-Seo noticed that again. The bracelet mattered to her, but not in the way jewelry mattered to women in Gangnam. It was not pride, it was fear. She held it like someone had told her it could either save her or destroy everyone around her. He turned to one of his guards. Clear the main floor. The guard hesitated for half a second. It was almost nothing, but Joon-Seo saw it. He saw everything. Now, Joon-Seo said. The hesitation vanished. The guests were moved from the dance floor to the private lounge area. Their phones had already been taken. Their luxury watches, diamond bracelets, and silk pocket squares could not help them now. In Club Obsidian, money only mattered until Joon-Seo decided it did not. One older businessman tried to protest. I have a meeting with the minister in the morning. You cannot keep me here like... Joon-Seo turned his head. The man stopped speaking. That was the power Joon-Seo had built over the years. He did not need to shout. He did not need to threaten. His silence carried the memory of every person who had challenged him and regretted it. But tonight that power felt strangely unstable. Because Mira had brought the past with her. Joon-Seo walked toward the private staircase that led to the upper lounge. Bring her. Mira stiffened. I can walk. You can barely stand. I said I can walk. Her voice was weak, but the pride in it was real. For a moment, Joon-Seo saw another face over hers. A younger girl in the old Kang estate, refusing to cry after falling from a horse. Sumin had been 12 then, with dust on her knees and fire in her eyes. I said I am fine, Appa. The memory cut through him so suddenly that his jaw tightened. Mira noticed. She was afraid of him, but she was also studying him. That made her dangerous in a different way. Joon-Seo stepped aside, then walk. She did. Slowly, every step was controlled, every breath was hidden. She refused to let the room see how much pain she felt. Joon-Seo respected that, even though he did not want to. They climbed to the upper lounge, a private level covered in dark wood, black leather, and walls lined with old Seoul photographs. Gangnam's skyline glowed beyond the rain-covered windows. Neon signs blurred into red, gold, and blue streaks. Far below, the sealed entrance of Club Obsidian was guarded by men in black coats. The upper lounge was where Joon-Seo held quiet meetings with men who believed they controlled the city. Tonight it became an interrogation room. Mira sat on a leather chair near the window. Joon-Seo stood across from her. Min-jae remained by the door, arms folded, eyes watchful. A doctor connected to Joon-seo's organization entered quietly to check Mira's injury. She refused at first, but Joon-seo gave her one look. "You came here asking me not to let them in," he said. "Do not make me waste time proving you want to live." Mira looked away. The doctor examined her carefully and spoke in a low voice. "She needs rest. The wound is not severe, but she has been running. There are bruises on her wrist and shoulder." Joon-seo's eyes moved to the bracelet again. "From being held," the doctor nodded. Mira's face tightened. Joon-seo dismissed the doctor with a small motion. When they were alone again, he asked, "Who grabbed you?" Mira said nothing. "Was it one man?" Still nothing. "Was it someone from my house?" Her eyes moved before she could stop them. There it was. The truth did not always come from words. Sometimes it escaped from the body. Min-jae stepped forward. "Boss." Joon-seo raised his hand, stopping him. He moved closer to Mira, but not close enough to frighten her into silence. He needed truth, not panic. "Yoon Mira," he said quietly, "you are sitting inside a club that men with armies cannot enter without permission. Every door is locked, every camera is being watched. Whoever sent you here cannot touch you unless someone inside helps them." Her fingers tightened around the bracelet. "So speak carefully. Not because I will hurt you." He leaned forward slightly. "But because if you lie, the person who used you wins." That reached her, her eyes lifted to his. For the first time, he saw the pain clearly. It was not only fear of death, it was guilt. Heavy, quiet guilt. "I did not know what it was," she whispered. "The bracelet?" She nodded. "They gave it to me and told me to wear it. They said if I reached this place, I should show it only to you." "Who are they?" Her lips parted. Before she could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the large security screen on the lounge wall turned black. Min-jae drew his weapon immediately. Joon-seo did not move. White letters appeared on the screen. "You still open doors for broken things." The room went cold. Min-jae looked confused, but Joon-seo felt the words like a hand closing around his throat. That sentence did not belong to an enemy. It belonged to a child. Years ago, when Sumin was still alive in his world, she used to sneak injured birds, stray cats, and abandoned dogs into the old family estate. Their father hated weakness. Their uncle called it foolishness. But Sumin always said the same thing. "Appa, we should open doors for broken things. How else will they learn they are safe?" Joon-seo had not heard those words in years. No one outside the family should know them. Mira stared at the message, her face pale. Joon-seo looked at her. "Did the person who sent you say that?" She shook her head quickly. "No, but I heard him say something else." "What?" She hesitated. Min-jae's voice hardened. "Answer him." Mira flinched. Joon-seo turned slightly toward Min-jae. "Lower your voice." Min-jae stopped, surprised. Joon-seo turned back to Mira. His voice became quieter. "What did you hear?" Mira swallowed. He said, "If the boss sees the symbol, he will forget the rules." Joon-seo stared at her. "He said you built your empire with discipline, but your sister built the wound they could still touch." The words settled into the room like smoke. Min-jae looked at Joon-seo, and for once, concern broke through his disciplined face. "Boss, this is not only a message, it is a test." Joon-seo already knew. Someone wanted to see whether he would abandon his own rules because of Sumin. Someone knew that beneath his black suit, his quiet power, his empire, and his reputation, there was still one locked room inside him. And they had just opened it. The security screen changed again. This time it showed live footage from outside the club. A black car stood across the rain-soaked street. Its windows were tinted, its headlights were off. Joon-seo stepped closer to the screen. The car had no visible plate, but he recognized the shape. Custom body, reinforced doors, Hanam-dong registration style, a vehicle used by old families who wanted privacy more than speed. Then the rear window lowered slightly. Only a hand appeared. An old family ring flashed under the streetlight. Joon-seo's eyes darkened. Min-jae saw the ring too. "That is impossible," Min-jae said. But Joon-seo knew it was not impossible. It was family. Mira's voice broke the silence. "That is the man who told them not to kill me before I reached you." Joon-seo looked at the ring on the screen. Then he looked down at his own hand. The same family crest, the same bloodline, the same house that had buried his sister's disappearance under lies and silence. He turned away from the screen. "Prepare the underground room." Min-jae looked at him sharply. "For who?" Joon-seo's voice was calm. "For family." Mira looked up at him, frightened. "What are you going to do?" Joon-seo looked toward the rain-covered window, where the black car waited like a secret dressed in luxury. "I am going to invite the past inside." The underground room beneath Club Obsidian had no windows. It did not need them. Men who entered that room were not meant to look outside. They were meant to look at the truth. The room was hidden below the private club, behind a mirrored wall, a service corridor, and a steel door that opened only to Kang Joon-seo's handprint. Most guests who danced above it had no idea it existed. They believed Club Obsidian was only a place of luxury, music, perfume, champagne, and secrets whispered under gold light. They did not know that beneath the marble floor was a quiet room where fortunes were broken, alliances were tested, and powerful men learned that silence could be more frightening than shouting. Joon-Seo entered first. The room was long and dark, with a black table at the center. One wall held security screens. Another held old framed photographs of the Kang family's public history. Charity dinners, political handshakes, company openings, family portraits, and luxury ceremonies designed to hide the blood under the gold. Mira followed slowly, guarded by Min-jae. She looked smaller down there. Without the music, lights, and watching crowd, her fear became more visible. Her wet hair had begun to dry against her cheeks. Her torn sleeve had been pinned loosely by the doctor, but the broken bracelet still hung around her wrist like a quiet accusation. Joon-Seo noticed she kept her hand close to her body, not to hide the bracelet anymore, to protect it. That troubled him. "You were told to show it to me," he said. Mira stopped near the table. "Yes, but now you are hiding it." She looked at him carefully. "Because the way you look at it makes me think it is not only a clue." Joon-Seo held her gaze. Most people avoided his eyes. They became nervous under his silence. They filled the air with excuses. Mira did not. Even afraid, she watched him as if she was trying to understand what kind of man stood between her and the people hunting her. "It belonged to my sister," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He had not said them so plainly in years. Min-jae's expression tightened, but he said nothing. Mira looked down at the bracelet. Her voice became softer. "I am sorry." Joon-Seo's face hardened. "There it is again. What? You apologize when you are afraid to tell the truth." Mira swallowed. Joon-Seo moved to the table and placed both hands on the black surface. His tattoos disappeared under his cuffs, but the edge of one design showed near his wrist, a dark line shaped like a blade wrapped in smoke. "Do not apologize to me again unless you are hiding something that will cost lives." Mira's eyes flickered. That was enough. Min-jae saw it too. "She is still hiding something," he said. Joon-Seo did not take his eyes from her. "I know." Mira stepped back once. "I did not ask to be part of this." "No," Joon-Seo said. "But someone made you part of it." The security screens behind him came alive. Footage from the street appeared in clean black and white angles. Rain, the club entrance, Mira stumbling from the alley. The black luxury car across the road. The lowered window, the hand wearing the Kang family ring. Joon-Seo watched the hand again. The ring was old, older than his father's reign. Older than Club Obsidian. It was the kind of ring given only to men trusted with the family's private decisions. "A ring his uncle Kang Do-won often wore," Min-jae spoke quietly. "It may be copied." Joon-Seo turned his head slightly. "You do not believe that?" Min-jae said nothing. That silence was loyalty, but it was also fear. Not fear of Joon-Seo. Fear of what this truth could do to the family. The Kang family did not survive because they loved one another. They survived because they understood power. Power needed order. Order needed secrets. Secrets needed people willing to bury them. Joon-Seo had buried many secrets, but not Sumin. Never Sumin. He looked at Mira again. "Remove the bracelet." Her hand closed around it. "No." Min-jae stepped forward. "You are inside his house, under his protection, carrying his sister's mark. You do not get to refuse." Mira's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "Protection?" she said. "Is that what this is? Locked doors, armed men, a room under the ground?" Min-jae's jaw tightened, but Joon-Seo raised one hand. Mira looked directly at Joon-Seo now. "I ran from men who smiled like gentlemen and gave orders like family. I was told if I reached you, I would live. I was also told if I gave you this bracelet, someone else would die. So forgive me if I do not know which monster is safer." The room went still. For the first time that night, Joon-Seo did not answer immediately. Her words were bold, dangerous even. But they were not foolish. She was right not to trust him. He walked around the table slowly and stopped a few steps away from her. "You think I am a monster?" Mira's voice shook, but she did not look away. "I think powerful men do not notice what they destroy until someone bleeds in front of them." Min-jae looked ready to speak, but Joon-Seo stopped him with a glance. The words should have angered him. Instead, they cut closer than he expected. Because Sumin had once said something like that too. Not with the same pain, but with the same courage. "Appa, people are not weak because they need help. They are weak when they stop seeing pain." Joon-Seo turned away. "Leave us," he said. Min-jae stiffened. "Boss," outside the door. Min-jae hesitated, then obeyed. The steel door closed behind him with a heavy sound. Now only Joon-Seo and Mira remained in the underground room. The screens glowed behind them. Rain moved silently across the camera feed. Above their heads, the club waited in fear. Joon-Seo took a small velvet box from a locked drawer in the wall. He opened it. Inside was a photograph, old, faded at the edges. Mira stared as he placed it on the table. The photo showed two children standing in front of a large family estate. One was a boy in a dark school uniform, serious even then. The other was a girl with bright eyes, holding up her wrist proudly. On that wrist was the same bracelet. Mira's breath caught. Joon-Seo watched her reaction closely. "You have seen her," he said. Mira shook her head too quickly. No, that was not a question. Her lips pressed together. Joon-Seo leaned closer. His voice became low. Mira, I can protect you from the men outside. I can protect you from the person who sent you. But I cannot protect you from a truth you refuse to speak. Her eyes shone now, not fully crying but close. I did not see her face. Where? Mira closed her eyes. A house. What house? I do not know. It was outside the city. Mountain road. Tall gate. No sign. They kept me in a lower room. Joon-Seo's body went cold. A secluded mountain villa. The Kang family owned 3. Who was there, he asked. Men in suits. Older men. One woman who never spoke. And the man with the ring. My uncle? Mira opened her eyes. I never heard he saw him. She nodded slowly. Joon-Seo waited. Mira looked down at the bracelet. He gave this to me himself. He told me to run when they opened the side gate. He said your men would find me if I reached Gangnam. Joon-Seo's eyes narrowed. He let you escape. Yes. Why? Mira looked at the photograph again. Because he wanted to see if you would recognize it. Joon-Seo took the bracelet gently but firmly from her wrist. This time she let him. The clasp was damaged, but when he turned it under the light, the crescent and serpent symbol became clear. Beneath it, there was a line so small most people would miss it. 3 engraved letters. KSM Kang Soo-min. Joon-Seo's fingers tightened around the bracelet. The room seemed to disappear for 1 second. He saw the old estate again, the storm. The servants running, his father shouting, his uncle standing too calmly in the hall. Soo-min's empty bedroom, the window open, bracelet missing from her jewelry box. For years, they had told him she was taken by enemies. For years, they had told him revenge would solve grief. But now the bracelet had returned from inside his own family's shadow. Mira whispered, Is that her name? Joon-Seo closed his hand around the bracelet. Yes. What happened to her? He looked at the photograph. My family said she disappeared. Mira's voice became careful. And what do you believe? Joon-Seo lifted his eyes. Before he could answer, the steel door opened. Min Jae stepped in, his face tense. Boss, Kang Do-won has arrived. Joon-Seo placed the bracelet beside the old photograph. The past and present touched on the black table. Then he adjusted his cufflinks, his face returning to calm stone. Bring him down. Mira stepped back, fear returning to her eyes. Joon-Seo noticed. This time he did not mistake it for weakness. He understood it as proof. The man walking into the underground room was the same man she had escaped, and possibly the same man who had stolen his sister from him years ago. Joon-Seo looked once more at the bracelet, then at the sealed door, then at Mira. Stay behind me, he said. She stared at him, unsure whether it was an order or a promise. For Joon-Seo, it was both. Kang Do-won entered the underground room like a man who had never been afraid of darkness. He wore a charcoal suit, a black coat over his shoulders, and a silver watch that caught the light with every controlled movement. Rain marked the edges of his shoes, but nothing about him looked disturbed. His gray hair was neatly brushed back. His face carried the calm smile of an elder who believed age itself was authority. 2 guards walked behind him. But Do-won did not look like a prisoner. He looked like a guest who had been inconvenienced. Joon-Seo stood at the head of the black table. The old photograph and broken bracelet lay before him. Mira stood a few steps behind his right side, partly hidden by shadow. But Do-won noticed her immediately. His eyes rested on her for less than a second. That was enough. Mira's body became still. Joon-Seo saw the change in her. He saw how her fingers closed around the edge of her torn sleeve. He saw how she lowered her chin, not in respect but in remembered fear. Do-hwan smiled gently. So this is the girl who disturbed your evening. Joon-Seo did not answer. Do-hwan removed his gloves slowly and placed them on the table. His eyes moved to the bracelet, then to the photograph. For a brief moment, something shifted in his expression. Not guilt. Recognition. Then it was gone. Old memories, Do-won said softly. Dangerous things to keep under glass. Joon-Seo watched him. Some memories survive because someone buried them badly. Do-won gave a small laugh. You summoned me from Hanam-dong in the middle of a storm to speak in riddles? I summoned you because a woman ran into my club wearing my sister's bracelet. Do-hwan looked at Mira again. This time his smile became colder. Did she? Mira did not speak. Joon-Seo noticed the careful way Do-won used silence. He did not deny. He did not explain. He waited as if the room itself belonged to him and everyone inside it would eventually bend. That had always been Do-won's gift. Joon-Seo remembered being young and watching his uncle control family meetings with soft words. His father had ruled with anger. Do-won ruled with patience. He could turn blame into doubt and doubt into obedience before anyone realized they had been moved. Tonight, Joon-Seo would not be moved. Min Jae stood near the wall, eyes fixed on Do-won. The loyal right hand said nothing, but his posture had changed. He was ready for whatever came next. Do-won pulled out a chair and sat without being invited. You have become dramatic, nephew. Joon-Seo remained standing. You have become careless, uncle. A faint amusement touched Do-won's face. Careless men do not live long in our family. No. Joon-Seo said, but arrogant men start believing family means protection from consequence. The words changed the temperature of the room. Do-won's smile remained, but his eyes sharpened. And what consequence have I earned tonight? Joon-Seo picked up the bracelet and placed it closer to him. You tell me. Do-won looked down at it. His face softened in a way that seemed almost kind. Su-min was a sweet child, he said, too soft for this family, too open-hearted. Your father worried she would become a weakness. Joon-Seo felt the old wound stir, but he kept his voice calm. My father is dead, do not hide behind him. Do-won's eyes lifted. You think I am hiding? I think you sent Mira here. Mira's breath caught behind him. Do-won leaned back. Is that what she told you? She did not need to. Ah, Do-won turned his gaze toward Mira. Then she has learned something useful tonight. Silence can be more useful than truth. Mira's face paled. Joon-Seo stepped slightly to the side, placing himself more fully between them. Do-won noticed and smiled again. There it is. Joon-Seo's eyes narrowed. There is what the mistake? Do-hwan gestured softly toward Mira. A wounded woman enters your club and the great Kang Joon-Seo changes the rules. Doors close, guests are trapped, old files are opened, family elders are dragged below ground like suspects. He leaned forward. That is why enemies study the heart. Even yours. Joon-Seo said nothing, but his hand closed around the bracelet. Do-won's voice became smoother. This girl may be lying, she may be paid. She may be wearing that bracelet because someone wants you angry enough to destroy your own house. Someone? Joon-Seo asked. Do-won spread his hands. You have many enemies, but only one family. The words landed heavily. For the first time, Do-won's smile faded. Joon-Seo picked up a remote from the table. The security screens behind him changed to show the black car outside Club Obsidian. The hand, the ring, the lowered window. Min-jae watched Do-won carefully. Joon-Seo asked, is that your car? Do-won looked at the screen, a pause. Small but real. No, is that your ring? No, Mira looked up sharply. Joon-Seo saw it. Do-won saw that he saw it. The room tightened. Joon-Seo's voice remained quiet. Mira, she looked at him. Tell me where you saw that ring. Her lips trembled once. She looked from Joon-Seo to Do-won and back again. The fear was clear, but beneath it something stronger had begun to grow. Anger. He wore it, she said. Do-won's expression did not change. When? Joon-Seo asked. At the house outside the city. The mountain road. He came into the room where they kept me. He gave me the bracelet and told me to run when the gate opened. Do-hwan sighed gently, as if disappointed by a child. Poor girl. Fear has made your memory useful to someone else. Mira stepped forward before Joon-Seo could stop her. No, she said. You told them not to hurt me too badly because I needed to reach him alive. Min-jae's eyes hardened. Do-hwan slowly turned to her. Be careful. Those two words were soft, but they made Mira freeze. Joon-Seo moved at once. He did not raise his voice. He did not touch Do-won. He only stepped closer to the table, and somehow the whole room understood that the uncle's authority had reached its limit. Do not threaten her in my house. Do-won looked up at him. Your house, he asked. This club, these cars, these men, this empire, do you think you built it alone? The Kang name opened doors for you before you knew how to knock. Joon-Seo leaned forward. And the Kang name closed the door on my sister. The silence after that was deep. Do-won's face became unreadable. Then he said, your sister was not made for our world. Joon-Seo's blood turned cold. It was not a confession, but it was close enough to one. Mira looked between them, sensing the meaning but not fully understanding it. Min-jae did. His hand moved slightly toward his jacket, then stopped. Joon-Seo placed the bracelet beside the photograph again. You knew this bracelet was hers. Do-won looked at it. Yes, the truth entered the room quietly, but it carried the weight of thunder. Joon-Seo asked, how? Do-hwan smiled again, but now it was thin and tired. Because I was there the night she lost it. Mira covered her mouth with one hand. Min-jae stepped forward. Joon-Seo did not move. Inside him, something old and dangerous opened its eyes. For years, he had imagined his sister's disappearance as a door forced open from the outside, an enemy attack, a kidnapping, a strike against the Kang family. But Do-won's words placed someone inside the room, someone trusted, someone blood-related. Joon-Seo's voice was almost a whisper. What happened that night? Do-hwan stood slowly. That is not a story for a room full of servants and frightened girls. Joon-Seo's gaze did not shift. Then speak to your boss. Do-won's face darkened. For the first time, the old man looked truly offended. You forget yourself. No, Joon-Seo said. Tonight I remember too much. Before Do-won could answer, one of the security screens flashed. A guard's voice came through the speaker from the control room. Boss, we have movement near the service tunnel. Min-jae turned. How many? Unknown. Cameras went dark on the east side. Joon-Seo looked at Do-won. Do-won looked back calmly. Mira whispered, they found me. Joon-Seo's eyes stayed on his uncle. No, he said. They were invited. Do-won's silence was the final answer. Joon-Seo lifted the bracelet and closed it in his palm. Then he gave a quiet command. Seal the lower exits. Move the guests to the inner lounge. No one leaves through the tunnels. Min-jae nodded and moved toward the door. Joon-seo looked at Mira. Stay close. Then he looked at Do-won. And you, uncle, will stay exactly where I can see you. Do-won smiled faintly as if the night had only begun. Above them, the luxury club remained locked under gold lights and rain. Below it, the family secret had started breathing. The first rule of Club Obsidian was simple. Everyone came through the front door. The second rule was known only to Kang Joon-seo's inner circle. Not everyone left the same way. Beneath the club's black marble floors, beneath the gold lights, velvet rooms, and expensive laughter, there was an older world. A hidden network of service tunnels stretched under the building like dark veins. Some led to private parking areas. Some led to storage rooms no guest would ever see. One led to an underground road connected to another property under a different name. The tunnels were built for emergencies. Tonight, someone had turned them into a trap. Joon-seo moved through the lower corridor with Mira close behind him. Min-jae walked ahead, speaking quietly into a secure earpiece. 2 guards followed at a careful distance. Behind them, Kang Do-won walked with his hands relaxed at his sides, as if he were being escorted to dinner instead of watched as a suspected traitor. The corridor was narrow and lit by soft strips of white light along the floor. The walls were dark stone. The air was colder than upstairs, carrying the faint scent of rainwater, metal, and old concrete. Mira's steps were slower now. Joon-seo heard the small change in her breathing. He stopped without turning. You are in pain, I can continue, she said. That was not the question. She said nothing. Do-won gave a quiet laugh behind them. She has pride. That is dangerous in people with no power. Joon-seo turned his head slightly. She survived your men. Do-won's smile thinned. Mira looked at Joon-seo's back. The words should have comforted her, but they made the fear sharper. If Do-won truly was behind what happened, then she was standing between 2 dangerous men, tied by blood, history, and power. One had used her. The other might still decide she was only useful as evidence. Yet when Joon-seo moved again, he slowed his pace. Not enough for the guards to notice. Enough for her. That small act unsettled Mira more than kindness would have. It suggested control, awareness. A man who noticed weakness but did not always exploit it. They reached a split in the corridor. 3 paths stretched ahead, left toward the underground garage, right toward the service lift, and straight toward the east tunnel. Min-jae stopped. The east cameras went dark first, he said. Joon-seo looked at the floor. There were wet marks near the east entrance. Not many, just enough to show that someone had passed through recently. Who had access tonight? Joon-seo asked. Min-jae answered immediately. Only the inner team security chief, 2 senior guards, me, you. Joon-seo looked at Do-won and family elders with old access codes. Do-won's face remained calm. You still enjoy accusing before proving. No, Joon-seo said. I enjoy watching guilty men wait for proof. A sound came from the east tunnel. Soft, metal against metal. Every guard became alert. Mira's hand tightened around the side of her dress. Her eyes moved toward the darkness ahead. Something about that sound reached her memory. Joon-seo noticed. You have heard that before. Mira nodded slowly. At the house, what was it? A gate unlocking? Min-jae raised his weapon and signaled to the guards. Joon-seo stepped in front of Mira. Do-won watched the movement with interest. There again, he said quietly. The weakness. Joon-seo did not look back. No, uncle. The difference. The difference? You used frightened people as bait. I used them as witnesses. For the first time, Do-won's expression tightened. The sound came again. Then the lights in the east tunnel flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the path. The guards waited for Joon-seo's order. Instead of sending men forward, he looked at Min-jae. Close the east gate. Min-jae frowned. If our men are inside, they are not. How do you know? Joon-seo looked at the wet marks on the floor. Because whoever entered wanted us to follow, not escape. He turned to one of the guards. Seal it. The guard moved to the control panel and entered the command. A heavy steel barrier began lowering from the ceiling at the mouth of the east tunnel. Halfway down, a voice came from the darkness. Mira, her whole body froze. The voice was male, calm, and familiar enough to hurt. Mira, it repeated. Come back, you were not supposed to make this difficult. Joon-seo looked at her. Who is that? She shook her head, but her face had gone pale. One of the men from the villa. The steel barrier continued lowering. The voice became colder. You do not belong with him. He will use you and throw you away when he gets what he wants. Mira's lips trembled. Do-hwan spoke softly behind them. Not an unreasonable warning, Joon-seo turned at last. You talk too much for a man who claims innocence. Do-hwan smiled. And you listen too much for a man who claims control. The steel barrier locked into place with a deep metallic thud. The voice behind it vanished. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the control panel flashed red. Min-jae stepped toward it. They are trying to override from the other side. Joon-seo's eyes moved to Do-won again. Old code? Min-jae checked the screen. His face darkened. Yes. Do-won lifted his hand slightly. Many people knew old codes. Joon-Seo moved closer to him. But only one person here knew which tunnel I would check first. Do-won said nothing. That silence was not empty, it was strategy. Joon-Seo understood then that his uncle was still playing for time. The men in the tunnel were not the real attack, they were noise, pressure. A reminder that Do-won could still move pieces outside the room. Joon-Seo turned suddenly to Min-jae. Who is guarding the guests? Min-jae answered, Team 3. Who assigned Team 3? A brief pause. Min-jae's face changed, the security chief. Joon-Seo's voice dropped. And who recommended him to me? Min-jae looked toward Do-won. The old man smiled faintly. Mira watched the exchange, realizing the trap was larger than the tunnel. It was inside the club. Inside the staff. Inside the trusted circle. Every layer of luxury above them had been quietly prepared for betrayal. Joon-Seo gave his next order. Lock Team 3 out of the inner lounge. Move Team 1 to the guests. Detain the security chief quietly, no panic. Min-jae obeyed immediately. Do-won laughed under his breath. You are learning? Joon-Seo faced him. No. I am remembering who taught the family to hide knives behind manners. For a moment, uncle and nephew stood in the cold corridor, the past pressing between them. Then Mira spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. There is another clue. Joon-Seo turned to her. She reached into the torn lining of her sleeve and pulled out a small piece of black paper, folded tightly and damp from the rain. I thought it was part of the bracelet packaging, she said. But when I heard the voice in the tunnel, I remembered. The man at the villa put this in my sleeve after your uncle left. Do-won's face changed only slightly, but Joon-Seo saw it. Mira handed the paper to him. He opened it carefully. Inside was a hand-drawn symbol, the crescent and serpent again. Below it was a short line written in simple ink. The girl did not disappear from the estate. She was taken through the family tunnel. Joon-Seo stopped breathing for 1 second. The family tunnel. Under the old Kang estate, there had been a sealed passage leading from the wine cellar to the mountain road. His father had claimed it was closed before Sumin disappeared. Joon-Seo turned slowly toward Do-hwan. His voice was quiet. Who opened the tunnel that night? Do-hwan looked at the note, then at Mira, then at Joon-Seo. The old smile returned, but now there was something dangerous behind it. You are asking the wrong question. Joon-Seo stepped closer. What is the right question? Do-hwan's eyes darkened. Why did your sister trust the person who led her there? The words hit harder than any accusation. Mira looked at Joon-Seo and saw the control in his face crack for the smallest moment. Not enough for most people to notice, but she noticed. The powerful Mafia boss, the man who could shut down an entire club with one command, had just been pulled back into the night he had never escaped. Joon-Seo folded the note and placed it inside his jacket. Then he looked at Min-jae. Prepare the cars. Min-jae frowned. Now, yes, to where? Joon-Seo's eyes stayed on Do-hwan. The old family estate. Do-hwan's smile disappeared. At last the uncle looked afraid, not of death, of memory. The old Kang estate stood beyond the bright streets of Gangnam, beyond the glass towers, luxury stores, and private clubs, where Seoul's powerful people hid their sins behind money. It waited in the hills like a memory no one wanted to enter. Rain fell harder as the convoy climbed the mountain road. 3 black cars moved through the night, their headlights cutting through mist and wet branches. The city disappeared behind them, replaced by dark trees, stone walls, and the heavy silence of old wealth. Mira sat in the back seat beside Joon-Seo. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Joon-Seo watched the road through the rain-streaked window. His face had returned to its cold calm, but Mira could feel the tension around him. It was not the same silence he had carried in the club. That silence had belonged to a boss controlling a room. This silence belonged to a brother returning to a wound. Min-jae sat in the front passenger seat, speaking quietly into his earpiece. Do-hwan rode in the second car, guarded by 2 trusted men. Joon-Seo had refused to let his uncle out of sight, but he had also refused to sit beside him. Mira understood why. Some betrayals needed distance before they could be faced. She looked down at her bare wrist where the bracelet had been. Without it, her skin felt strangely light, as if something had been removed that was never hers to carry. But the fear remained. She had entered Club Obsidian thinking she was running from strangers. Now she was inside a family secret older and more dangerous than she had imagined. Joon-Seo spoke without looking at her. You said there was a lower room at the villa. Mira nodded. Yes. Was it like a cellar? I think so. The walls were stone. There was no window. I heard water sometimes, like pipes or rain passing under the floor. His eyes narrowed. The estate had old drainage channels under the west wing. Sumin used to say the house sounded alive when it rained. As children, they would sit near the staircase and listen to water moving through the stone. Mira noticed his hand tighten slightly. You know the place, she said. Joon-Seo did not answer immediately. Then he said, I grew up there. The words made the car feel colder. Mira turned toward the window. Outside, the road curved upward, and the outline of a high stone wall appeared through the rain. At the top of the wall stood iron gates marked with the Kang family crest, a crescent, but no serpent. Mira stared at it. The symbol on the bracelet had been different, twisted, changed, as if someone had taken the family crest and wrapped it with a warning. The first car stopped before the gate. For a moment no one moved. The estate rose behind the iron bars, wide and dark, with long windows and stone steps shining under the storm. It did not look abandoned. It looked preserved, like a powerful family had frozen its past and ordered time not to touch it. Joon-Seo stepped out into the rain without waiting for an umbrella. Mira followed slowly, ignoring the pain in her side. The cold air struck her wet dress and made her shiver. Joon-Seo noticed. He removed his black coat and placed it around her shoulders without speaking. Mira looked up at him, surprised. He had already turned toward the gate. Min-jae watched the gesture but said nothing. The guards brought Do-won from the second car. The old man looked up at the estate, and for the first time that night his calm seemed thinner. "This is unnecessary," Do-won said. Joon-Seo walked toward him. Rain ran down his hair and across the sharp lines of his face. "Then it should be easy." Do-won smiled faintly. "You think walls tell the truth?" "No," Joon-Seo said. "But tunnels do." The gates opened with a deep groan. They entered the estate grounds. The driveway curved through wet gardens and old pine trees. Stone statues stood on both sides, their faces darkened by rain. Mira felt as if they were walking into a place that had been waiting for them for years. Inside the house, everything smelled of wood polish, stone, and old flowers. The grand hall was beautiful in a cold way. A chandelier hung above them like frozen gold. Family portraits lined the walls. In each painting the Kang family stood proud, elegant, and untouchable. But the largest portrait had been covered with a black cloth. Mira's eyes moved to it. Joon-Seo saw her looking. "My father ordered it covered after Sumin disappeared. He said grief made the house weak." Mira looked at him. "And you believed him?" Joon-Seo's face remained still. "I was young enough to obey, old enough to hate myself for it." That was the first honest thing he had said that sounded like pain instead of command. Do-won's voice came from behind them. "Your father protected the family from scandal." Joon-Seo turned slowly. He protected himself from guilt. Do-won's expression hardened. "Be careful with the dead. I am more interested in the living." Min-jae stepped forward. "Where is the family tunnel entrance?" Joon-Seo looked toward the west side of the hall. "The wine cellar." They moved through a long corridor lined with dark mirrors. Mira caught her reflection as she passed. Pale face, torn dress, Joon-Seo's black coat around her shoulders, eyes too wide for the luxury around her. She looked like someone who had walked into a story that wanted to swallow her. At the end of the corridor, stairs led down. The air changed as they descended. It became colder, damp, and heavy with the smell of old stone. The wine cellar stretched beneath the estate, filled with wooden racks, locked cabinets, and dusty bottles worth more than many homes. Joon-Seo stopped near the far wall. There was nothing there except stone. Do-won said quietly. "The tunnel was sealed years ago." Joon-Seo looked at him. "Before or after she disappeared?" No answer. Min-jae examined the wall. "There is no handle." Joon-Seo stepped closer. His hand moved over the stone, searching. A memory returned, Sumin laughing in the cellar. "You always look at the obvious places, Appa." She had pressed a carved grapevine on the wall, and a hidden panel had opened. He had been 15, she had been 11. Their mother had scolded them for playing near the tunnel. His hand found the carved grapevine. He pressed it. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then a section of the wall clicked. Mira stepped back. The stone door opened inward, releasing a breath of cold air from the darkness behind it. Min-jae lifted his flashlight. The tunnel stretched ahead, narrow and wet, disappearing beneath the estate. Joon-Seo stared into it. The past was no longer a memory, it was a path. Mira looked at Do-won. The old man's face had gone pale. Joon-Seo turned to him. "You said I was asking the wrong question. So I will ask again." He stepped closer, his voice low and controlled. "Why did my sister trust the person who led her here?" Do-won's eyes flickered toward the tunnel. Then he said the words that changed the night again. "Because she thought she was saving you." Mira's heart tightened. Joon-Seo did not move. "What did you say?" Do-won looked at him now, and his smile was gone completely. "Sumin did not run from the estate, Joon-Seo. She walked into that tunnel because someone told her your life depended on it." The tunnel seemed to breathe between them. Joon-Seo's face became colder than Mira had ever seen it, but his eyes carried something broken beneath the surface. "Who told her that?" Do-won looked away. Joon-Seo stepped forward. "Who?" Before Do-won could answer, a sound came from deep inside the tunnel. Not a voice, not footsteps, a soft metallic chime. Mira looked down the dark passage, and her blood turned cold. It was the same sound she had heard at the villa, a gate unlocking. Joon-Seo took the bracelet from his pocket and held it tightly. Somewhere in the tunnel beneath the old Kang estate, a hidden door had opened, and someone was already waiting inside. The sound came again. A soft metal chime echoed through the tunnel, gentle and sharp at the same time. It was too clean for such an old place, too deliberate. It sounded like someone had touched a hidden lock far ahead, knowing everyone in the cellar would hear it. Mira stepped closer to the stone wall, her fingers gripping Joon-Seo's black coat around her shoulders. "That sound," she whispered. "I heard it before they let me run." Joon-Seo looked into the tunnel. The darkness seemed deeper than darkness should be. It did not feel empty, it felt watched. Min-jae moved in front of him. "Boss, let me send 2 men first." "No," Joon-Seo said. Min-jae turned. "This is a trap." "Yes, then you should not walk into it." Joon-Seo's eyes remained fixed on the tunnel. "That is exactly why I must." Du-hwan gave that quiet laugh behind them, but there was no confidence in it now. "You still think courage and pain are the same thing?" Joon-Seo turned slowly. The bracelet was closed in his fist. "And you still think fear makes you wise?" Du-hwan's mouth tightened. For years, Joon-Seo had seen his uncle as a man of perfect control. Tonight, cracks had started to show. Small ones, a pause before an answer, a glance toward the tunnel, a stiffness in his shoulders when Sumin's name was spoken. Du-hwan was still dangerous, but he was no longer untouchable. That mattered. Joon-Seo gave orders quickly. 2 guards stay with him. If he moves without permission, restrain him. Min-jae, with me. Mira stays behind. Mira looked up sharply. No, everyone turned toward her. Joon-Seo's face hardened. "This is not a choice. It is if I know the sound. You are injured, and you do not know where the gate leads." Her voice trembled, but she did not lower her eyes. The fear was still there, but now it had joined with purpose. She had been used as bait, dragged into a family war, and marked by a bracelet she did not understand. But the tunnel was connected to the room where she had been held. She knew that, she felt it. Joon-Seo studied her. Min-jae spoke first. "Boss, she may be right. If this connects to the villa or the old route, she may recognize something we miss." Joon-Seo disliked the logic because it was true. He stepped closer to Mira. "If you come, you follow every order." She nodded. "If I say stop, you stop." "Yes, if I say run, you do not argue." Mira hesitated. Joon-Seo's eyes sharpened. She finally nodded. "Yes." Du-hwan watched them with a strange expression. "Careful, nephew. This is how it begins." Joon-Seo did not look at him. "What begins?" "Attachment disguised as responsibility." Mira looked away, wounded by the words, even though they were not fully meant for her. Joon-Seo's voice turned cold. "No. This is what you never understood. Protecting someone is not weakness." He stepped into the tunnel. The air inside was damp and cold. Water dripped from stone overhead. The passage was narrow, wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side, but not comfortably. Min-jae carried a flashlight, and its white beam cut across old walls covered with cracks, dust, and faint scratch marks. Mira followed behind Joon-Seo with 1 guard behind her. Every step took them deeper under the estate. The tunnel sloped downward first, then leveled out. The floor was uneven. Old metal pipes ran along one wall. At some points, the ceiling dipped low enough that Min-jae had to lower his head. Joon-Seo remembered this place differently. As a boy, the tunnel had seemed exciting, forbidden. A secret path under a grand house. Sumin had loved it because she loved hidden places. She used to say old houses kept their real stories underground. Now he understood how right she had been. Mira suddenly stopped. Joon-Seo turned. "What?" She pointed to the wall. There, scratched into the stone, was a small crescent. Not painted, not carved beautifully, scratched with something sharp. Below it was a line, the serpent. Min-jae leaned closer. "Fresh?" "No," Joon-Seo said. He could tell from the worn edges. The mark had been there for years. Mira touched the wall lightly, then pulled her hand back. "There were marks like this near the room where they kept me." Joon-Seo's chest tightened. The symbol was not only a family crest. It was a trail. Sumin, or someone connected to her, had left marks behind. They continued forward. After several minutes, the tunnel split into 2 paths. One led left, toward what should have been the old mountain road. The other led right, deeper into the hill. Joon-Seo stopped. This was not here before. Min-jae lifted the flashlight toward the right path. The stone there looked newer, still old but not part of the original tunnel. "Someone expanded it," Min-jae said. Mira's breathing changed. Joon-Seo noticed immediately. "You recognize it." She nodded slowly. "The smell." Min-jae frowned. "The smell?" "Cold stone, damp air. Something like old flowers." She looked into the right passage. The lower room at the villa smelled like this. Joon-Seo turned toward the right path. Before he could move, a speaker hidden somewhere in the tunnel came alive with a soft crackle. Then a woman's voice filled the dark. "Oppa." Joon-Seo froze. The word was quiet, simple. But it struck him harder than any threat. Min-jae's face changed. "Boss?" Mira stared at Joon-Seo. She did not understand the language of the wound fully, but she understood the effect. The powerful man in front of her had stopped breathing, like the tunnel itself had reached inside him. The voice continued. "If you hear this, it means they finally brought you back to the place where it started." Joon-Seo took 1 slow step toward the sound. "Sumin," he whispered. The recording crackled. I do not know who I can trust. I do not know if this will reach you. But if Uncle Do-won is with you, do not let him stand behind you. Min-jae turned sharply toward the way they had come. Mira's eyes widened. The message continued. He told me you were in danger. He said if I followed him through the tunnel, he could save you. I believed him because he was family. Joon-seo's fist tightened around the bracelet until his knuckles paled. The recording paused, then Sumin's voice became smaller. I was wrong. A heavy sound came from behind them. Far back in the tunnel, near the cellar entrance, someone shouted. Then a door slammed. Min-jae spoke into his earpiece, but only static answered. Joon-seo turned. The trap had closed. Mira whispered, your uncle. Joon-seo's eyes darkened. Do-won had waited until they entered the tunnel. He had wanted them underground, separated from the guards, surrounded by old secrets and blocked signals. The woman's recorded voice spoke one last time. Oppa, the family did not lose me. They traded me. The words filled the tunnel and stayed there. Joon-seo stood completely still. For years he had built his life around one belief. His sister had been taken by enemies. But now her own voice told him the truth. She had been handed over, used, hidden, turned into a secret the family could not afford to reveal. Mira watched him carefully. She expected rage. Instead, she saw something worse. Silence. The kind of silence that came before a man stopped being wounded and became dangerous. Joon-seo turned toward the deeper right tunnel. Min-jae said, Boss, we need to get back. Do-won may escape. Joon-seo's voice was calm. He will not run far. How do you know? Joon-seo looked at the crescent serpent mark on the wall. Because this tunnel was not built only to hide my sister. He looked into the darkness ahead. It was built to lead me to what they did with her. Mira stepped beside him. For the first time, she did not stand behind him because he ordered it. She stood beside him because she had chosen to. Joon-seo looked at her once, then forward again. The hidden door under the mountain had opened. And beyond it waited the truth that had destroyed his family long before he became its boss. The tunnel beyond the hidden door did not belong to the old Kang estate. Joon-seo knew it the moment he stepped inside. The stone changed first. The walls were smoother, newer, and colder. Small lights had been placed low along the floor, glowing faintly like dying stars. The air carried the scent Mira had described. Damp stone, old flowers, and something sharp like polished metal. This was not a forgotten passage. This place had been maintained. That truth made Joon-seo colder inside. For years his family had allowed the old estate to look untouched. They had covered portraits, sealed rooms, and spoken of Sumin's disappearance as if grief was a locked box. But below the house, someone had kept building. Someone had kept hiding. Someone had kept the past alive in the dark. Min-jae walked ahead, weapon lowered but ready. Mira stayed near Joon-seo, her face pale under the weak tunnel lights. She was trying to be brave, but he could hear how carefully she breathed. Every few steps her hand moved toward her side. You should have stayed in the cellar, Joon-seo said. Mira glanced at him. You already said that, and you ignored it. You still let me come. He looked forward. That was not permission. It was strategy. Mira almost smiled, but the fear in the tunnel stole it before it formed. Then your strategy is limping, she said softly. Joon-seo looked at her for one brief moment. It should not have mattered. A small attempt at humor in a tunnel full of betrayal should have meant nothing. But it reminded him of Sumin again. She had dull soft jokes when she was afraid, as if fear was a room she could brighten with one sentence. That memory made his expression harden. He could not afford softness here. Not when Do-won was behind them. Not when Sumin's voice had just told him she had been traded. They reached a metal door at the end of the passage. It had no handle, only a small screen beside it. Min-jae examined it. Modern lock, he said. Not older than 5 years. Joon-seo's eyes narrowed. 5 years. That meant someone had used this place long after Sumin disappeared. Long after his father died. Long after Joon-seo became head of the family's visible empire. He had ruled the city above the ground while another kingdom survived beneath his own bloodline. Mira stepped closer to the wall. Her eyes fixed on a small mark scratched near the lock. The crescent and serpent. But this one was different. There was a thin line through the serpent's head. What does that mean? She whispered. Joon-seo reached out and touched it. I do not know. Min-jae looked at the lock. We can force it. No, Joon-seo said. Not yet. He took the bracelet from his pocket. The metal felt cold in his palm. He turned it over and examined the broken clasp. The letters KSM were still visible. Beside them, almost hidden by damage, was a tiny raised edge. Joon-seo pressed it. A small piece of the bracelet opened. Inside was a thin black chip. Mira drew in a quiet breath. That was inside it? Joon-seo said nothing. Sumin had always loved hiding things. Notes inside books, keys under flower pots, birthday gifts behind loose panels in the library. Their father had called it childish. Joon-seo had called it clever. Now years later, her cleverness had survived where family loyalty had failed. He placed the chip near the lock screen. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up. A soft click followed. The metal door opened inward. Beyond it was a small room, not a prison room, not exactly. It looked like a private study built under the mountain. There was a desk, shelves, a narrow bed, old lamps, and walls covered with papers, photographs, maps, names, dates. Some were connected with black string, others were crossed out. In the center of the far wall was a large photograph of the Kang family estate. Mira stepped inside slowly. "This was not the room where they kept me," she said. Joon-Seo entered behind her. His eyes moved across the walls, taking everything in. There were names of family companies, private bank accounts, old board members, hidden properties, birth records, shipping routes, political favors, family alliances. And then he saw the photographs, zoom in, not as the child he remembered, older, alive. In one photo, she stood near a window wearing a dark coat, her hair longer, her face thinner but unmistakable. In another, she sat at a table with papers spread in front of her. In a third, she looked directly at the camera, not smiling. Joon-Seo could not move. For years, he had imagined her as a frozen memory. A girl in the rain, a child lost in the old estate, a sister he had failed to protect. But the woman in the photographs had lived beyond that night. She had grown up somewhere in the dark. Mira looked at the photos, then at him. She saw the change in his face. It was not weakness. It was shock held so tightly it almost became pain. Min-jae lowered his weapon slightly. "She was alive," he said quietly. Joon-Seo's voice was rougher than before. "She is alive," he refused to say was. "Not yet." On the desk sat an old recording device and a sealed envelope. The envelope had his name written on it. Joon-Seo. The handwriting struck him harder than the photographs. He knew it, older, sharper, more controlled, but still hers. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a short letter. He read it silently at first, but Mira watched the way his eyes moved and knew every line was changing him. Then he read the final part aloud, his voice low. "If this reaches you, do not trust the first truth they give you. Uncle Do-won did not act alone. I was traded to protect a family agreement. I stayed hidden because coming back would have started a war before you were strong enough to survive it." Mira covered her mouth with one hand. Min-jae looked toward the tunnel behind them. Joon-Seo continued reading. "The woman carrying my bracelet is not your enemy. She is proof that Do-won has become careless. Protect her, but do not let your heart make the next decision. That is what they are counting on." The room fell silent. Mira's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide them. She had believed she was only bait, a wounded messenger, a tool used by powerful people. But this letter said something different. Soo-min had known about her, maybe even chosen her. Joon-Seo looked at Mira. For the first time, he did not see only a trap. He saw a person trapped by the same family machine that had taken his sister. Then Min-jae found another document on the desk. "Boss." He handed it to Joon-Seo. It was a list of names. At the top was Kang Do-won. Below him were other family elders, private lawyers, company directors, and one name Joon-Seo did not expect. His late father. Mira saw the shadow cross his face. "What is it?" she asked. Joon-Seo stared at the list. The people who knew. His voice was quiet, but the room seemed to tighten around it. Min-jae looked at the wall again. "There is more. These dates continue after your father died." Joon-Seo followed his gaze. The latest date was recent, very recent, 3 weeks ago. Beside it was a note written in Soo-min's hand. "Do-hwan is preparing to use the boss's weakness. If he sends the girl, the war has already begun." Mira stepped back. "He planned this for weeks?" Joon-Seo shook his head slowly. "No." He looked at the photographs, the maps, the names, and the tunnel behind them. "He planned this for years." Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. The recording device on the desk turned on by itself. Soo-min's voice filled the room again. "Oppa, if you are hearing this inside the study, then you found the first door. But there is one more truth you must know." Joon-Seo stood completely still. The voice continued. "The family did not trade me because I was weak. They traded me because I found out what they were building under our name." A soft click sounded from the far wall. A hidden panel opened, revealing a narrow stairway leading even deeper below the mountain. Soo-min's recorded voice became softer. "And if Do-won came with you, he is not trying to escape." A pause. "He is trying to reach the room below before you do." Joon-Seo turned toward the tunnel behind them. At the same moment, distant footsteps echoed through the passage. Not running, walking, calm and certain. Do-won was coming. Joon-Seo folded the letter and placed it inside his jacket, close to the bracelet. Then he looked at Mira. "This ends below." Mira's voice shook. "What is below?" Joon-Seo looked toward the hidden stairway. "The reason my family buried my sister alive in their secrets." The stairway beneath the hidden study was narrow, steep, and silent. Joon-Seo went down first. Mira followed close behind him, one hand touching the cold wall for balance. Min-jae came last, turning every few steps to watch the passage behind them. Above, the sound of Do-won's footsteps grew closer, slow and confident, as if he had walked this path many times before. The air changed as they descended. It became colder, cleaner, more controlled. This was not an old tunnel anymore. This was something modern, hidden under stone and history. Small lights glowed along the steps. The walls were reinforced. There were security cameras in the corners, but their lenses had been covered with black tape. Someone had wanted this place watched. Then someone else had wanted it blind. Joon-Seo thought of Soo-min. She had not only survived, she had fought from inside the secret. At the bottom of the stairs stood a wide black door with the Kang family crest engraved into the center. The crescent was there, polished and proud, but the serpent had been scratched over it by hand, as if someone had tried to expose what the family symbol had become. Mira stared at it. That mark, she whispered. It was not your family's symbol. No, Joon-Seo said. It was her warning. Min-jae stepped closer to the control panel beside the door. It needs a code. Joon-Seo looked at the bracelet in his hand. The chip had opened the study, but this door required something else. On the panel, a small line of text appeared. Name the one opened the door. Mira frowned. What does that mean? Joon-Seo knew. His chest tightened. Soo-min had not made this for strangers. She had made it for him. She had built the lock around memory, not numbers. He touched the screen. Letters appeared. Do-won. The panel flashed red. Wrong. Min-jae looked at him. Try your father. Joon-Seo's expression hardened, but he typed it. Wrong again. The footsteps above were closer now. Mira looked up the stairway. He is almost here. Joon-Seo stared at the words on the panel. Name the one who opened the door. Not the one who planned it. Not the one who gave the order. The one who opened the door. His mind returned to the night Soo-min disappeared. The storm, the house in panic, servants running, his father shouting, Do-won standing too calmly, the wine cellar door left unlocked. And then, deeper than the memory everyone had repeated to him, another memory surfaced. Soo-min knocking on his bedroom door earlier that evening. Appa, if someone told you I was in danger, would you come? He had laughed then, distracted by a family meeting he was not supposed to attend. Of course. She had smiled sadly. Even if they told you not to? He had told her not to be dramatic. Then later, when the estate fell into chaos, he had found her room empty. But before that, someone had opened his own door. A servant. An old housekeeper. Mrs. Han. She had told him his father wanted him in the East Hall. She had led him away from the corridor near Soo-min's room. She had looked frightened, but he had thought nothing of it. Joon-Seo typed slowly, Han. The panel turned gold. The lock opened. Mira let out a quiet breath. Min-jae looked disturbed. The housekeeper? Joon-Seo's voice was cold. Not the mastermind. The hand that obeyed. The black door opened inward. Behind it was the room below the family name. It was not what Mira expected. There were no gold decorations, no luxury, no family portraits. The room was wide, white, and painfully clean. Long stood in the center, covered with files, sealed boxes, old drives, photographs, and ledgers. On the far wall were screens showing maps of Seoul, ports, private properties, foreign accounts, and names of powerful families connected by lines. It was not a prison, it was an archive. A hidden archive of everything the Kang family had done to stay powerful. Mira stepped inside slowly. This is what she found, she said. Joon-Seo looked across the room, his face unreadable. Yes, Min-jae picked up one file. His expression changed as he scanned the first page. Boss, these are alliance records. Joon-Seo took the file from him. It listed private agreements between families, companies, officials, and old underworld groups. Some were business deals, some were political protection. Some were names tied to missing people, hidden payments, and forced silence. At the center of it all was one agreement from years ago. The year Soo-min disappeared, Joon-Seo read it once, then again. His hand tightened around the paper. Mira watched his face, afraid to ask. He answered without her asking. My sister discovered that the family was using charity foundations to move money and people quietly. Min-jae's jaw tightened. She found the archive. Joon-Seo nodded. And they gave her a way to stop her from speaking. Mira's eyes filled with horror. But the scene did not need loud emotion. The truth was already heavy enough. Then a voice spoke from the doorway. No. Do-won stood at the entrance. He was alone, his guards were gone. His suit was still perfect, but his face no longer carried the soft smile of an elder. He looked older now, and more dangerous because he had stopped pretending to be kind. We did not give her a way to stop her from speaking, he said. We gave her a way to stop a war. Joon-Seo turned slowly. Do-won stepped into the room. Your father built too many enemies. Soo-min found the archive before she understood what it meant. She wanted to expose everything. She thought truth would save people. His eyes moved to the files. She was a child. Joon-Seo's voice was quiet. She was right. Do-hwan laughed once, bitterly. Right? If she had spoken, this family would have been destroyed. Our allies would have turned. Our enemies would have attacked. Your father would have sacrificed anyone to survive. Including you. Mira looked at Joon-Seo. That was the missing piece. Soo-min had followed Do-won because she believed Joon-Seo was in danger, and perhaps he had been. But Do-won had used that danger to remove her. Joon-Seo walked closer to his uncle. You told her she was saving me. I told her the truth. You trapped her with it. Do-won's eyes sharpened. I saved your life. Joon-Seo stopped. The room seemed to hold its breath. Do-won pointed toward the archive. You think your father loved you? You were his heir, nothing more. When Soo-min threatened to expose the family, your father planned to remove both of you from succession. He would have destroyed you to protect the empire. I made a bargain. Joon-Seo's face stayed cold, but Mira could see the pain beneath it. What bargain? He asked. Do-won looked toward the hidden files. Soo-min would disappear, you would live. The family would remain intact. Mira whispered, you used her as payment. Do-won looked at her. I used one life to protect many. Joon-Seo's voice dropped. No. You used a child to protect power. For the first time, Do-won looked angry. You speak like a man who has never had to choose between blood and survival. Joon-Seo stepped closer. I have been choosing all night. He looked at Mira. Someone wounded her to reach me. Then at Min-jae. Someone turned my own security against me. Then back at Do-won. And someone buried my sister under the family name and called it protection. Do-won's hand moved toward his coat. Min-jae immediately raised his weapon. Joon-Seo lifted one hand, stopping him. Do-won smiled faintly. You still think this room gives you power? Joon-Seo said nothing. Do-won continued, these files do not only destroy me, they destroy the family. They destroy your companies, your alliances, your protection, your name. Release them, and you become King of Ashes. Joon-Seo looked around the archive. For a moment, Mira understood the true choice. This was not only revenge. If Joon-Seo exposed the truth, he could lose everything that made him powerful. His wealth, his family control, his luxury empire, his place in the city. The same name that made men fear him could become the name that buried him. Do-won knew it. That was why he had come. He was not trying to reach the room first to erase the truth. He was trying to force Joon-Seo to choose between truth and power. Mira stepped forward despite the pain in her body. Your sister already chose, she said softly. Joon-Seo turned to her. Mira pointed to the scratched serpent mark on the door. She left the warning. She left the bracelet. She left the recordings. She knew this would cost something. But she still wanted you to find it. Do-won's face hardened. You know nothing about this family. Mira looked at him, fear still in her eyes, but her voice did not break. I know what it feels like to be used by it. The room fell silent. Joon-Seo looked down at the bracelet. For years he had thought power meant never being touched by pain. But Soo-min had understood something he had forgotten. Power without truth only made a beautiful cage. A family name without loyalty was only a decorated lie. He placed the bracelet on the main table. Then he removed his family ring. Do-won's eyes widened slightly. Joon-Seo. Joon-Seo set the ring beside the bracelet. The family crest and Soo-min's warning lay next to each other. I am not choosing ashes, Joon-Seo said. I am choosing what survives the fire. Min-jae looked at him. Mira held her breath. Joon-Seo turned to Min-jae. Copy everything. Do-won's calm finally broke. You cannot. I can. You will destroy us. Joon-Seo looked at him with the full coldness of a boss and the full grief of a brother. No, uncle. He picked up Soo-min's bracelet. You already did. At that moment, one of the screens on the wall flickered on. A live video appeared. A woman stood in a dim room, her face partly hidden by shadow. She was older than the girl in the photograph, but Joon-Seo knew her before she spoke. His heart stopped. The woman looked directly into the camera. Appa, she said softly. Mira covered her mouth. Min-jae froze. Do-hwan went pale. Joon-Seo took one step toward the screen. Soo-min was alive. And she was watching them. For the first time in years, Kang Joon-Seo forgot the room around him. The archive, the files, the hidden agreements, the cold white walls, even Do-won's broken expression faded into the background. Only the screen remained, only her face. Soo-min, older, thinner. Stronger than the child in his memory. Her hair fell over one side of her face and there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, but she was alive. Not a ghost, not a story buried by family. Not a wound he had imagined for too long. Alive. Joon-Seo moved closer to the screen, but his voice did not come out at first. Soo-min smiled faintly, and the small movement broke something inside him. Oppa, she said again, softer this time. His hand tightened around the bracelet. Soo-min. The name left his mouth like a prayer and an accusation together. Mira stood a few steps behind him, unable to look away. She had seen the boss command rooms, silence powerful men, and lock down an entire club with one order. But now, standing before his sister's face, he looked like a man who had carried a storm for years and had finally seen the sky open. Min-jae lowered his weapon slowly. Do-won did not move. His face had gone pale, but not from shock alone. He knew this moment had changed everything. A hidden file could be denied, a symbol could be explained away, a wounded woman could be called a liar. But Soo-min's living face could not be buried so easily. Joon-Seo stepped closer to the screen. Where are you? Soo-min looked away for a moment, and the camera shook slightly, as if someone else had adjusted it from a distance. Safe enough for now, that is not an answer. A sad smile touched her lips. You still speak like you can order the world to obey. I can send men, I can bring you home. Her expression changed. Home? The word carried too much pain. Joon-Seo went silent. Sumin looked past him as if she could see the archive behind his shoulders. That house stopped being home the night they traded me. Do-won finally spoke. You do not understand what would have happened. Sumin's eyes shifted toward him through the screen. The softness left her face. I understood enough as a child to know you lied. Du-hwan straightened, trying to gather the remains of his authority. I saved your brother. You used my love for him, she said. That is not the same thing. The words hit the room with quiet force. Mira looked down. She understood that kind of cruelty now. To be used because of what you cared about. To be turned into a message. To have pain shaped into someone else's weapon. Sumin's eyes moved to her. You are Mira. Mira froze. Yes, I am sorry. Mira shook her head slowly. You do not have to apologize to me. Yes, I do, Sumin said. I knew Du-won would use someone innocent when he became desperate. I tried to leave enough signs so my brother would protect you before he understood why. Mira's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. I thought I was bait. You were proof, Sumin said. Proof that he had started using the same methods again. Joon-Seo turned toward Du-won. His uncle looked cornered now, but not helpless. A cornered man with too many secrets was still dangerous. You planned this, Joon-Seo said. Du-won's jaw tightened. I planned survival. No, Joon-Seo said. You planned control. Du-won looked at the archive around them. And what will you plan? Revenge? Exposure? Public shame? You think the people connected to these files will allow you to walk out with them? Joon-Seo's eyes were cold. They do not need to allow it. Du-won laughed bitterly. You still think power is men with guns and cars in the rain. Joon-Seo stepped closer. No. Tonight I learned power is evidence. Min-jae moved to the central system and connected a secure drive. Files began copying across the screen. Contracts, ledgers, names, old videos, payment records, property routes, and hidden agreements. The archive that had protected the Kang family for years began to leave the room in clean digital silence. Du-won stared at the transfer bar. Stop this. No one obeyed him. His voice rose, but only slightly. Joon-Seo, once this leaves the room, there is no going back. You will lose allies. You will lose protection. You will lose the family name. Joon-Seo looked down at the ring he had placed on the table. The Kang crest no longer looked powerful to him. It looked heavy. I lost the family name the night it became more important than my sister. Du-won's face hardened. You are emotional. Joon-Seo looked at him. I am clear. The difference silenced the room. On the screen, Sumin watched her brother, with eyes full of things they had no time to say. Years had been stolen from them. Childhood had been cut in half. Trust had been broken and rebuilt into suspicion. But something still remained between them, quiet and alive. Joon-Seo picked up the bracelet. I looked for you everywhere. Sumin's face softened. I know. I should have found you. You were a boy. I became powerful. You became watched, she said. There is a difference. That truth hurt him because it was correct. He had thought his empire made him free, but every step he took had been studied by men like Du-won. Every weakness measured, every grief turned into a possible weapon. Mira stepped forward slightly. Then what happens now? Sumin looked at her, then at Joon-Seo. Now he chooses who stands beside him when the old house burns. The transfer finished. Min-jae removed the drive and placed it in Joon-Seo's hand. Copied? Joon-Seo closed his fingers around it. Du-hwan looked at him with quiet fury. You think this makes you clean? No, Joon-Seo said. It makes me awake. He turned to Min-jae. Take him upstairs. Lock down the estate. No family elder leaves Seoul tonight. Freeze the private accounts linked to these files. Send copies to the safe channels Sumin marked. Min-jae nodded. Then Joon-Seo added, and no one touches Mira. Mira looked at him, surprised. Du-hwan smiled coldly even as Min-jae's guard stepped toward him. There it is again, the weakness. Joon-Seo looked at Mira, then back at his uncle. No, he lifted Sumin's bracelet. This is the part of me you failed to kill. Du-hwan had no answer. For the first time all night, he looked like an old man, not a ruler. As guards led him away, he turned once at the door. You still have not asked the most dangerous question. Joon-Seo's eyes narrowed. Du-hwan smiled faintly. Who kept your sister alive? Then he was gone. The door closed behind him. Silence returned, but it was different now. It no longer felt like fear. It felt like the space after a truth had finally entered the room. Joon-Seo turned back to the screen. Sumin was still there. Du-won is right about one thing, she said. He was not alone. I know, and I cannot come back yet. His face tightened. Why? Because the people who kept me alive also kept me useful. I had to become someone they did not expect. Joon-Seo understood the meaning beneath her words. His sister had not simply been hidden. She had survived by changing. By learning the world that had swallowed her. By becoming strong in places where no one had protected her. Tell me where to find you, he said. Sumin smiled sadly. Soon. The screen flickered. Sumin, her eyes softened. Protect the girl. She carried my warning through the rain. That means she is already part of the truth. Mira's breath caught. Joon-Seo turned toward her. For a moment they stood in the cold archive beneath the mountain, surrounded by the remains of a family lie. Mira was no longer just the injured woman who had limped into his club. She was the witness who had survived the trap, the messenger who had carried the bracelet, the stranger who had helped open the door to his sister's voice. Sumin spoke one last time. Appa, Joon-Seo looked back at the screen. Do not look for the girl I was. His voice softened. Then who should I look for? Sumin's smile faded into something stronger. The woman who learned how to survive them. The screen went black. Joon-Seo stood still for a long moment. Then he placed the bracelet inside his jacket, close to the letter and the drive. Above them, thunder rolled over the old estate. Rain struck the stone walls like the past, demanding to be let in. Mira hugged his black coat around her shoulders. What happens now? She asked quietly. Joon-Seo looked at the black door, the archive, the scratched serpent mark, and the family ring still lying on the table. Then he picked up the ring. For 1 second, Mira thought he would put it back on. Instead, he placed it inside a metal evidence box and closed the lid. Now, he said, we stop protecting the family name. He turned toward the stairs and start protecting the truth. Outside, the convoy waited in the rain. By morning, the powerful families of Seoul would wake to find doors closing around them, private accounts frozen, old allies silent, hidden names exposed. And somewhere beyond the city, a woman once called Lost would know her brother had finally chosen her over the empire that buried her. Mira followed Joon-Seo up the stairs. She was still hurt, still afraid, still unsure what her place was in the storm ahead. But she was no longer apologizing. At the top of the stairs, Joon-Seo stopped and looked back at the dark passage beneath the estate. For years he had searched for a ghost. Tonight he found a war, and this time he would not enter it blind.